Hey, what's up, folks? Sorry, it's all dark and uh, shadowy. But anyway, I wanted to talk about the show um, on Netflix, Sandman, and the way in which quote unquote wokeness or, you know, the attempt to propagandize through entertainment is terrible and cringe, at least in how it can be in this way, like um because it's great that like there should be representation, there should be diversity, ideally, there should be positive portrayals of every type of demographic. um but But for one thing, a lot of times the representation isn't even positive because they cast, black people, gay people, trans people as villains. And and I'm sure whoever casts them thinks they're being super woke because they're giving a job to a black person. And I'm sure people, if they're actors, they'll take whatever job, but it's still not progressive in any good way to just keep, the, the amount of recent films and movies where black people are the villains and there's not even a lot of black people in the cast, but and yet it's still treated as okay to make some black person the villain. um because they just figure, well, I gave a job to a black person, so I'm pretty progressive or something. I don't know. But I mean, that's kind of the case in this one, like in Sandman. Um, so yeah, Sandman, it just came out. It's on Netflix. It's like based on the comic, quote unquote graphic novels, whatever, by Neil Gaiman, or however you pronounce that shit. Gaiman, Neil Gaiman. Uh, and so it's set in England, mostly in London, and fully half the characters are black. I think, yeah, basically like half the characters are black. And it's also partly set in the US. But it's just like becomes cringe because it's trying so hard, it's trying so hard to like, because black people are like what percentage of the like they're like, like 12% of the population in the US, and they're even less of the population in the UK. So the idea that they're just somehow in this universe, they're half the population, comes off as just trying too hard, just like it's just becomes silly. And then they also, everybody's gay in it. Like everybody, like at least half of the characters in this are gay, and it's not because they're like in the Castro, or like, you know it's just like, it's just treated as that in London half of people are black and half of people are gay, or maybe two-thirds of people are gay, or at least bi. And so again, that's comes off as like, uh comes off, I don't know, it's just comes off as ridiculous because it's so far from reality. And to try and say, oh, it's promoting diversity or whatever, it just, I mean, if anything, I guess maybe they're just trying to troll people that are not super woke or something. Um, but you know, like there's a scene where it's just a bunch of random people in a diner, and by like the end of the episode, it emerges that like half or more of them are gay. And it's just like treated as like that's normal, that like half of people are gay. It's not true, you know, like it's like less than 10% of people are gay, like probably less than 5% of people, whether in the UK or the US, are gay. Um, you know, and it doesn't it doesn't portray them all sympathetically though. A lot of them are terrible. A lot of them are villains. A lot of the gay people are villains. Some of the black people I think are villains. Um, there's a trans person who's a villain. So it's like I'm sure they're patting themselves on the ass for like being so woke for putting a trans person in, but they made him or her, I don't know, or it's maybe like a non-binary person or something, but they they made them a villain. So it's like, how is that? But in the warped brains of these Hollywood wealthy shit libs, like that's woke. To it's like representation. Oh yeah, I showed a powerful trans figure. Sure, they're a villain, but of course, people who watch these, cheesy, you know, people who are into these weird comics probably love the villains more than the heroes anyway. So, but it's like, they can't even do wokeness right. So, I I googled it to see, like, I'm sure there's like a backlash. So I Google like Sandman woke, and there's just all this like mainstream bullshit, and like Neil Gaiman. I'm just gonna call him Neil Gaiman because that's like a British insult, and he is like an imbecile like on other things too. But so he was like, "Oh yeah, all these heteronormative cis het males were complaining that that it's too woke or whatever," and he's like so proud of whatever, that he trolled all these people, and that clearly they have nothing to um they have no leg to stand on or whatever, they have no argument. But it's like, I mean, the thing is, like, clearly they poured a lot of money into this, and so it's well produced, it looks cool, like I'm watching it for that, for the aesthetics and for the infernology, because there's a lot of infernology and mythology in it, which I study, and so it's kind of interesting that way. But it's like the fact that the idea that you can't even criticize it for being too quote unquote woke, um, when it's just so blatant. And it's just funny how whenever Hollywood or these, rich idiots try to do wokeness, they always do it wrong. They can't even do it right. So, like, he makes fully half of, somehow half of London is black or more. It's almost like more than half of the characters are black and more than half of the characters are gay. And it's just treated as like, oh yeah, most people are gay and black in England and in the US. Sure. Like, but there's nobody else. There's like black people and white people, and there's nobody else. There's no Asians. There's no Middle Easterners. There's no Mexicans. There's nobody else. It's just a world in which most people are black, a bunch of people are white, most people are gay. It's just so bizarre, like I mean, because then you can argue they're shitting all over every other race that they don't include at all. Um, that might even be more numerous in London, There's no South Asians. There's nobody else. It's just like black people and white people, and that's like the idiot's idea of diversity. Like some rich idiot who's like, well, because to some rich idiot like Neil Gaiman, probably all non-whites are basically blacks. So it's like that's just oh yeah, yeah, the blacks, the whites and the blacks, and that's everybody, right? Right? Fuck. So anyway, I think like I still watched it. It was a trip, like it's fun to watch on drugs. It's very visually aesthetic, but I do hope they have a huge backlash for the cringiness with which they try to propagandize, and for them shitting all over people who criticize them, shitting on critics and just being like, oh, well, if you're a cis male, then your opinion doesn't matter. Okay, then maybe you shouldn't have cis males watch your shit, because I guarantee if you took away the white cis hetero males who bought his